want to see subtitles on the YouTube recording of this class, click the settings icon on the bottom right corner. Then click Subtitles, English Auto-Generated, click Subtitles again, then Auto-Translate, and select your language.
Hi everyone, I'm Lauren. I'm here at Essex Market inside the Essex Kitchen, and this is our Fresh Bites at Home series. Thank you so much for joining us today at our new day and time. We're going to be live every week moving forward on Thursdays at noon, so I hope you'll be able to join us. You can always look for our recipes at essexmarket.nyc/freshbites. And I'm really excited about today's recipe. It's a new recipe for us. I wanted to find a way to use some of the corn that I still have left over from the summer season. And this is just going to be a super nutritious and hearty chowder, or kind of like a thick soup. That's a wonderful way to kick off the fall. So this is our yellow split pea and corn chowder. So the first thing I'm going to do is work on my corn. So you need about 3 or 4 ears of corn. You could use frozen corn if you're making this later in the season, you don't have fresh on hand. I need to remove the kernels from our cob. So I'm going to go ahead and take this smaller bowl. I'm going to put it upside down in a larger bowl. So if you've watched any of our videos or my class before, you'll know this is sort of my trick to easily getting the corn off the cob without making a huge mess all over our cutting board. So I'm just running my knife down the side of each part of our cob, and it's just falling off more or less neatly all into my bowl here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that with our other 2 pieces here. And while I work on that, I'm gonna put these yellow split peas in front of us, and I'll tell you a little bit about those. So yellow split peas are something that I love cooking with because they're actually a type of field pea. So different from the green peas that we eat, but still in the same family. They're grown specifically for the purpose of drying. And so they're called split peas because they literally harvest the peas and dry them and then split them down the middle. And you can kind of see this in the green peas that we eat at home. If you bite into one, you'll see it sort of has this, I don't know, seed sort of component in the middle that's flat on one side. And so that's the way our split peas are. And because they have so much more surface area than the full dried peas, like a pigeon pea, or in a different family like our lentils, you don't need to soak them, and they cook a lot faster. So I'll just show them a little bit with my hands. So there's a yellow split pea and a green split pea. Those are just 2 different varieties of field peas. And again, they have this flat surface on one side, and that just means that they cook much faster than our other dried peas. So that's why I love using them. They're super nutritious, packed with tons of fiber and protein. Just a 1/4 cup of these peas has about half of the protein we need in one day. So they're really good for us. So before we work with these items on the stove, I'm gonna prep some what people might refer to as our aromatics, or basically the things in our soup that is gonna give it all of its flavor. So the first thing I'm working with here is some celery. I have about 3 stalks here. This kind of soup is really forgiving. So if you don't have a particular ingredient, for example, the first time I made this, I didn't have any celery on hand, but I had some fennel, and that was a really nice addition. So it can be flexible. We're just kind of trying to get the base of our soup to have some nice flavor components. So 3 stalks of celery I've chopped up here into small pieces. And now I have half of an onion that I'm gonna cut to be about the same size. You might be wondering where the other half of my onion went, and that's in the stove, on the stove here right next to me in this big pot. So to get our soup, with some of the liquid that it needs to cook and to soak with these peas to get them cooked, we need water or broth. So you can always buy chicken broth or vegetable broth in the store, but especially when it comes to vegetable broth, it's so easy to make it at home. It's really not worth spending the money on getting canned or boxed vegetable stock. So what I have in this pot is about 7 or 8 cups of water, because I know I need at least 6 cups for my soup, and some of it's gonna boil off. So I put that water in, and then also in that water, I added the other half of our onion. I added 2 garlic cloves smashed. I added a couple of our celery pieces that I had, and also some cilantro, because we're gonna use cilantro as a nice garnish or topping on our chowder. So why not flavor the broth with that as well? So I have it simmering here on the stove next to me. And I mean, it's been going since I started. It's the very first thing I'll do when I start cooking, is what I want to tell you. So if you put that on the stove right away, by the time you finish prepping everything else and you've started sauteing your vegetables, the broth or the stock is going to be ready for you to use. So you're just infusing water with the flavors of the vegetables that we're putting into our chowder. And that's gonna give it, you know, much more depth of flavor and be essentially more interesting than using just plain water. But of course, if you don't have time to do that or you forget, 6 cups of regular water would be just fine. So I have 2 cloves of garlic here that I'm cutting small. I'm gonna go ahead and throw that into a little bowl. And I'm going to also cut up some jalapeno. So the other flavors that we have going into this soup are some spice from the jalapeno, and then I'm also going to add a little bit of paprika. So it's going to give it this really kind of nice smoky component. And I think what we're mimicking in a sense here is the classic split pea and ham soup. So a lot of folks might have had that kind of soup growing up, and ham, of course, has a bit of a smoky flavor, and so the paprika is going to give us some elements of that, but we don't have to add any processed meat. So I'm removing the seeds and the membrane from my jalapeno because I can't handle a lot of spice personally. And so, as we always say, the spiciness of our peppers is living in those seeds, in that white part of the pepper that we call the membrane. And once you remove those, it gets rid of a lot of the aggressive heat, and you're left with just, you know, the nice mild spice flavor of a jalapeno. Okay, so that's cut nice and small. And the last thing we need to cut up before we head over to the stove is a potato. So the real purpose of the tomato is to give our soup some heft. So this soup, what you're gonna wanna do is, after it's cooked for about 40 minutes or so and all of your vegetables and split peas are soft, is you wanna grab either your handheld immersion blender or your regular blender or food processor, and you want to puree about half of the soup in that blender or using your hand blender. And what's nice is the split pea and the corn, you know, the potato as well, they're all very starchy, and so that's what's going to sort of thicken our soup, and it just gives it a really nice comforting texture. And so adding the potato, you know, we are going to get little pieces of cooked potato when we eat the soup, but more importantly, it's going to add some starch to when we blend it all up. Okay, so here we are at the stove. I already told you about the stock that I have going over here, and here I have the pot that I'm going to work with to make my soup. So I'm just going to coat the bottom of my pan with some olive oil. And we're gonna start with our hearty vegetables first. When I'm making soup, I try not to really brown the vegetables. We're just sort of looking for them to get soft and translucent is what we're going for here. So while it's heating up, I'm gonna talk about this ingredient I have in my can here. So this is some light coconut milk. This is optional, but after we puree our soup, if you want to give it an even creamier texture, you can add anywhere from a half to a full can of light coconut milk. I'm using the coconut milk to keep this recipe totally just dairy-free, totally vegan. But you know, if you wanted to add a splash of cream, I actually think what might be really nice is some plain yogurt or some sour cream would be really pleasant, because it's nice when this soup has a little bit of tanginess. When I've made it at home, I'll dollop that on top when I'm serving it. A little dollop of sour cream, some fresh cilantro. I've even done pickled jalapenos. If you're feeling crazy and you want to treat yourself, you can also crisp up a little bit of bacon and crumble that on top. That's pretty awesome too. So I've got that chopped onion and celery in our pot. We just need this to soften a little bit. And the next step will be to add our garlic and jalapeno that we cut up. So while this is going, I'm going to strain my stock. So I'll turn off the heat, and I have a colander here just resting over. I happen to have one of these really giant measuring cups, but you know, any sort of bowl will work fine. So I'm gonna carefully pick this up and pour the stock right in. I'm dribbling a little bit, but I won't worry about that too much. Okay, so now our onion and celery has gotten pretty soft, been steaming for a bit, so I'm gonna go ahead and add that chopped garlic and jalapeno. And since these are cut so small, we really only want them to cook for about 30 seconds to a minute. I can already smell it actually. You know, they're very prone to burning because they're so small. So we just want to cook it until it releases some of its flavor. Next, I'm going to add my potato. After this, there's not really any rhyme or reason to the order that you add things in. I'm just adding them one at a time and giving them a stir because I want them to, all the flavors to mix together. So now I'm gonna do a generous pinch of salt. I also added salt when I was making our stock. So that's gonna add flavor there as well, so I'm not dumping tons of it on at this moment in time. Let our potatoes pick up that flavor. All right, and now I have some Spanish paprika, this beautiful red color. It's got a really nice smoky flavor, I love it. Yeah, so smoked paprika is what you're looking for. Ooh, I can smell it right away. We always want to add our spices directly to a hot pan. A lot of recipes are going to tell you to add the spice when you add the liquid, which doesn't make any sense because we need those, the spices are dried. We need to basically reactivate them. So we add them to at the point where they can still interact with some hot oil, and that's releasing all the flavors. Plus, we want to coat the vegetables in the spice. We don't need to coat the liquid in the spice. So this is my preferred method. And now that that's looking good, I have my 1 full cup of yellow split peas. Put that in. And again, just stirring to get everything coated in the flavor. Okay, our second star, since this is a corn and split pea chowder, it's gonna be our fresh corn that we cut up here. Okay, so you can see everything is well coated. It's easy to tell because that paprika has such a beautiful bright red color. So now it's time for our liquid. So I'm just scraping at the bottom of the bowl in case anything, bottom of the pot I should say, in case anything is sticking to the bottom there. I'm releasing it, getting any sort of caramelized flavor that occurred when we were sauteing our vegetables. And this is gonna need to cook for about 40 or 45 minutes. So what we're looking for is you wanna test a potato and a split pea, and both should be soft. They should be easy to bite through. So when you get to that point, you can go ahead and grab either your handheld immersion blender, which is something that I have. I love using it for pureeing soups, but you could also just throw this into a blender and then back into the pot. If you do it that way, you just want to blend about half of the soup. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in. So you can really take this to whatever level you want. For me, I like it quite pureed because I just like the thickness that it creates, but you know, you don't have to go all that way. I'm just gonna keep it so I get a few chunks of those vegetables. And then, as I've said, optional to add a little bit of creaminess to our recipe, I'm gonna add about half of this can of light coconut milk. And it's just gonna give it a really amazing, creamy, rich flavor. You could add some plain yogurt, milk, or just leave it out if you're happy with the way it is. All right, beautiful. So I'll go ahead and give it a taste, see if it needs anything extra, any salt. Wow, I think it's perfect. The only thing I might do at home is give everyone a little wedge of lime. I think adding a little bit of acidity to the soup would be really nice. So you can see it's all nice and creamy. Definitely don't skip out on adding some fresh cilantro. That's the topper. So this is our yellow split pea and corn chowder. You can find the recipe for this and everything that we do at essexmarket.nyc/freshbites. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.